we got to start picking against Teofimo.
Yeah.
When we start picking against Teofimo, there's something in him that just rises to the occasion. You give him too much credit, it's almost like he reads his own press clippings and underwhelms. But you start picking against him, this guy pulls it out of nowhere.
Put that man's back against a wall. That's when he steps up. And that's what I mean about those fight weeks. I mean, it's like it's a whirlwind.
Welcome into the ranking show here on ProBox TV. That's where we take a survey of everyone behind the scenes in a particular weight class, give you a top 5 to then argue about. That's what we do. Today, we're dealing with the 140-pound division. Call it junior welterweight if you want. Look, you can go back to Aaron Pryor, Alexis Arguello, their pair of amazing fights. Then you get into Manny Pacquiao, Ricky Hatton, and the two men joining me today in studio. I have Chris Algieri, spent his time at 140 pounds, and Paulie Malignaggi joining us via Zoom. He's waiting on his mom's spaghetti, making time for us. That's right, on the show. Anyway, 140 pounds at number 5. What I love about this list, Chris, is there are some guys that at the beginning of the year wouldn't have put on this list. I think that's what I like that shock face. That's where we're starting out at number 5. Jose Rayo Valenzuela. Before he took on Isaac Cruz, all the talk was about Isaac Cruz. You said something prophetic. He can win if he stays disciplined, but I don't think he will. Well, he did. Is it a matter of he's better than 14-2, or is he facing the right guy for his style with his long arms? What do you think?
No, I think he's better than 14-2. I think he's. Listen, he was always very fun. He was a sharpshooter. He's got good power when he was fighting at 135. He's tall. He's long. He's a southpaw. Moves up to 140. Looked like he actually put on good muscle, put in the work that was necessary to be a true 40-pounder, even though he's fighting a much smaller guy, and Isaac Cruz is not a true 40-pounder. But he fought a very disciplined fight. 5'10", 70-inch reach, southpaw with power, and he's a sharpshooter. So he's precise. He pulls the trigger. He threads the needle. He's a dangerous guy. And we knew that going into that fight, but it seemed like in the past, and I think, Paulie, this is something you said, champ, is he tends to fight more than he needs to. And with a guy like Isaac Cruz, that's a troublesome place to be. But he didn't. He fought very, very disciplined. He showed a different wrinkle to his game. I think he elevated himself. He had elevated his status. And now he's a world champion. And yeah, like you said, at the beginning of this month, he wouldn't have been on this list. But now he is. And I think, honestly, he deserves to be in the top 5, even though this weight class has had a facelift multiple times this year already. But I do think he's good enough to be where he's at right here at number 5.
We'll get into all that Botox later. I mean, a few facelifts in this top 5. But Paulie, when you talk about Valenzuela, this idea that he was disciplined against Isaac Cruz, 2 things. Does he stay disciplined enough to beat the really technical guys? And number 2, to Chris's point, he was facing a guy who was always coming at him. He always had a target right there to sharp shoot. Is everybody going to do that? Can he rise higher than number 5, in your opinion?
Well, he's a guy who's shown the improvements in a fighter who doesn't have an easy schedule. Rayo Valenzuela is a guy who's easy to root for because obviously he's a good guy. He's a good kid, right? But also he's not had it easy. He wasn't really set up to become a world champion. There are some guys, they get signed by the big promoter. They get brought up the way a star gets brought up constantly on the A side. They get the team pays for the grizzled veteran opponents to make them look good on their record, but they're just shot enough the way they can't beat them, and they all elevate themselves. And by the time they fight for a world championship, they are bigger stars than the champion typically, and everybody's just waiting for the coronation. Rayo Valenzuela didn't have any of that. Rayo Valenzuela has had to do it the tough, hard way, man, and he's had to do it in a shorter schedule, honestly. Even only 14-2, he already fought De Los Santos. He fought Chris Colbert. He fought a lot of guys that have had shown the strength of schedule that he has, to use a college football term, right? So I don't know, man. He's a guy who's shown a lot of improvements. I think he's an improving guy. I think he's an improving guy from the guy we saw earlier in his career, De Los Santos fight. Obviously, even the Chris Colbert fight. Look how much he improved from the first fight to the second fight in the Chris Colbert fight. That was a drastically different performance. And not to say that I don't think he won the first Chris Colbert fight, because for a lot of people, he probably did win the first Chris Colbert fight. But to come back and dominate in the second one and put him away in a knockout of the year contender, you may have actually won knockout of the year with that knockout. I don't remember. But nonetheless, he's a guy who has shown that improvement and dominated Pitbull Cruz, honestly, in a fight that he wasn't even, not only wasn't favored, and people really didn't think he'd really perform at 140 pounds and be here. And you talk about how many facelifts the weight class has gotten. Let me tell you this: the guy he beat for the world title would have been on the list at the beginning of the year. So because Pitbull Cruz at the beginning of the year also was a lightweight and then came up and beat Rolly Romero. So this weight class has gotten a lot of facelifts. Valenzuela is a guy you really can't pinpoint yet, because I think he's a guy who's probably been written off several times in a short career. Honestly, so just 16 pro fights, and yet he continues to know how to hang around, continues to always be exciting, and is improving. And the strength of schedule, I think, is a big reason for that, along with, of course, the random reasons that you obviously give credit to Robert Garcia for, having made probably some of the changes as well in the adjustments and the brilliant performance he had against Isaac Cruz.
Our next on our list at number 4 is somebody, Bob Arum, if he had his way, wouldn't be on here. Jack Catterall, of course, defeating in a rematch Josh Taylor, avenging a loss that has been on his mind forever, taking on Regis Prograis in his next fight. Much more experience, right? That's what he has over Valenzuela, 29-1. Not the hardest punch in the world, only 13 knockouts. What do you think of his skill set and his placement on the list? Where'd you put him, Chris?
He's an often forgotten about guy. He just doesn't really move the needle for a lot of fans, but he's very talented, and he's a good boxer. He's smart, he's disciplined, he's conditioned. You mentioned those couple wins that he had, the Josh Taylor fight. Most people thought he got robbed in the first fight, comes back in the second fight, wins. I wouldn't say handily, but definitely won that fight. There'll be some arguments, of course, from Taylor and his squad. He's got the Regis Prograis fight, but it's still open. This is still an open case for me in terms of Jack Catterall. I really haven't seen him have that breakout fight yet against an opponent who's really where they're supposed to be. Taylor, there's a lot of questions about how much Taylor had left both times that Catterall got him. Now we got Regis Prograis coming up next. I don't think we're going to have an answer there either, because there's the question about how much Regis has left. He's fighting older guys that are on the downslope of their careers. So I don't know if we're really going to know where he's really going to fall, even after this Regis Prograis fight, if he is to win. But I do believe that Jack Catterall has some real skills, and he can give anyone trouble. Again, another southpaw, fights out of that crouch stance, has good jabs, good timing, and he's a dog. He finds ways to stay in fights and to win, can make it ugly at times. So, which might be part of the reason why people kind of tend to look him over, because he's not the most exciting fighter. But in a weight class like this, where, listen, we keep mentioning facelifts and how many times this weight class has changed. He's a guy who could slide in there and beat some of the top guys.
Well, we originally did a list at light heavyweight. Of course, download the ProBox TV app. Check it out for yourself. Had a great discussion about 175. You said a similar thing about Buatsi. Over there, a talented guy, but does he move? Anthony Yard, does he move the needle over there, or is he a UK guy in a sense?
Buatsi's a little different. He's got that big amateur background, and I think he's a physical talent as well. He's got power. He's exciting. He just hasn't really. I think for him, it's much more undue. Jack is just kind of like a victim of circumstance in terms of the kind of fighters that he's got to fight and how. But a little bit different situation, but also a guy that could slide right in there and do some damage.
Paul,
so use both sound like you want to give him credit, but at the same time doesn't move the needle for you. He's talented. You might as well say the good fellas, right? He's talented. Let's leave it at that, right?
Let's leave it at that. He's talented.
Leave it at that.
But I'm gonna go a little bit more than he's just talented, because if Devin Haney was put on the pound for pound list and already was being prepped as the next star for beating 175-year-old guys like Jorge Linares, and then later on Regis Prograis, who we didn't know was past his prime until now. So I'll give Haney that performance. But he's beating Gamboas, he was beating those kind of guys. Listen, Catterall not getting credit for being an undefeated Josh Taylor, and then beating Linares. I mean, hey, if what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I'm all for the criticism when guys are a little bit past it. But if we're going to give one guy credit for building up a resume on these guys, we can't just take it away from the other guy. I think Catterall is a sort of what we used to call like a cutie type of fighter, in that he's got that cutie annoying style, southpaw slick, throws off your timing. He's got a bit of an off rhythm, but he's athletic. He's going to be tough for anybody to beat, man. Honestly, he's not always going to be the most exciting guy, but he'll make your favorite fighter look bad, and he may beat your favorite fighter. If he doesn't beat your favorite fighter, he may get robbed against your favorite fighter. He's got that kind of style, and he's done it consistently enough now. I've seen him do it consistently enough now. Where the first Josh Taylor fight, he wasn't really known on our shore. So you're thinking, okay, was this sort of a fluke? Who is this guy? And for all intents and purposes, he won that fight, right? So, but now it's been pretty consistent to the point where when he fights, okay, hey man, one of the best fighters in the 140-pound division is fighting. We're going to tune in regardless of what you think of his style. He's an effective guy. He knows how to win. Okay, he knows how to win, and that's important if you're going to hang around at world-class level. I understand some guys are going to be more exciting than other guys. Jack Catterall knows how to win, and that's an important factor.
Well, Champ, I got to give you a little pushback on the Haney comparison, because I said about Catterall, he needs that breakout fight against a guy who's more in the top of the class. Haney has the win over Lomachenko. That was what separated him.
The gift over Lomachenko. Yeah, well,
listen, he still performed great. He still performed great.
He got robbed. It's all in the politics.
I don't think he got robbed. But
in the first Taylor fight, you thought he won the first Taylor.
No. I was talking about Lomachenko Haney. Excuse me, I didn't think you meant that. Well, but no.
90% of people thought he got robbed.
But again, I pull into question how much of Taylor was still around at that point. Because he was the man for a while.
He's undefeated.
Yes, yes, but still, it seemed like a lot of the outside of the ring stuff really caught up with Taylor at that point. He hasn't looked good since.
Well, I think there's always going to be that question mark, and I think we're still going to have it.
Yeah.
I don't listen. There's always discussion points in these kind of things, even for Haney, even for anybody else. And I think that's why we have these shows, and you look for more, and you wish that guys would be able to stay busy, and that's why we want to see these guys fight consistently, so we can make up our minds. Oh, these soft schedules, not these soft schedules, but these slow schedules, these once or twice a year fights. You want to see those world-class guys get in there, because especially when a weight class is so jam-packed with talent, you can't really figure it out unless they fight constantly. They fight each other.
Catterall's tried to stay busy. He had those. The Taylor fight got pushed back so many times. The rematch happened way too long after, partly because Taylor kept pushing back because of injuries and whatnot. But again, the fighters that he fought, you mentioned Linares. Linares was, 40 years old by the time they fought. He fought a lot of older guys. I feel bad he gets a raw deal because he hasn't had that real fight where you could be like, all right, boom, that's the guy. Because he can be, like you said, he's a tough guy to beat.
Let's talk a little bit as we move up the rank. We talk about the facelift at 140 pounds. This is one that's almost the other side. Liam Paro, boom, beats Subriel Matias and was supposed to be Matias coming out party, fighting at home, supposed to be his breakout, the boogeyman of this division. What happens? Liam Paro beats him. So the other way around, he got a great fight, won that big fight, but doesn't have really a collection of them, doesn't have the length of experience at the elite level. What do you think about Liam Paro at number 3, higher than more experienced guys?
I don't think I have him above Catterall, to tell you the truth, because he's kind of a similar guy. He's got a tough, tricky style. He's got a little more power for sure. But if you look at his resume, yes, the Subriel Matias fight, great job. But I was telling everybody that guy can be outboxed, and if you got some footwork and you stay disciplined, you can win the fight. Not knocking that performance, great performance by Paro. Then he had the Montana Love fight. Anybody knew Montana Love wasn't the guy, and he blows him out, beats him up, stops him. But Montana had just lost to Steven Sparks, and then had a really tough fight prior to that. So I don't think that's a huge winner. Then he fought some other Brock, another Australian, that guy, I don't know how he got his record to where he was, but he couldn't punch his way out of a wet paper bag. And Liam Paro blasted him out too, very, very quickly. So he's another one. You got to look past his record a little bit, and it looks very sterling, obviously undefeated. Obviously some big knockout wins. Brock Jarvis is the guy. I remember watching that fight and being like, who? I saw that guy fight before that. I was like, who is this guy? Where do you find him from? But so I think I need to see more from him. Yes, the Subriel Matias fight, he did it against the guy that quote-unquote was the boogeyman. But I got to see more. I can't put him above even a guy like Catterall.
What's your thought on his placement? I don't know whether he's good or not, but his placement at number 3, too high, too low for you, Paulie? What do you think?
There's a debate here. The 140-pound division is just debatable in general, right? Because there's been so much shifting around, as the champ said earlier. I sort of understand where the champ is coming from, because he was actually one of the rare people that wasn't drinking the Subriel Matias Kool-Aid. Everybody was starting to drink that Subriel Matias Kool-Aid. So when Paro gets that win, it's a big, big deal. So I can understand why, Chris, you wouldn't be convinced on Paro yet. But for those of us that were buying the Subriel Matias Kool-Aid and drinking it gallons at a time at a certain point, that's a huge, huge win. And then say you don't rate Matias. Say Matias turns out to be overrated. Say Matias never comes back to be what he looked like he was going to be. you still went into a harsh territory. You still went into another fighter's home country, hometown, and you took a championship away from him. You dealt with the pressure going in, who was of fighting a guy who was very heavily hyped. You don't know, how that's going to play out in general. The pressure and the stress, and he showed ice in his veins in doing what he did there. So he does have the character that's necessary to be at this level. Does he have the complete skill set? Yeah, that's what we're trying to find out, man. I mean, the Montiel fight is a great performance, but then, the level of opposition, otherwise, strength of schedule, as I sometimes call it, we're waiting for it. Possibly he's fighting Haney next, right? So maybe that'll give us some answers. But then again, if he beats Haney, are we going to say, well, Haney was maybe not the same fighter after the Garcia fight? I don't know, but like I said, there's too many questions and there's not enough fights in boxing today because, this is a weight class with so many fighters and there's so many question marks. So it's shifted around so many times that you need these guys to fight often if we're going to get clear answers. Otherwise, we're just going to be doing this. I'm going to have an opinion. You're going to have an opinion. Everybody in the comment section is going to have their own opinion, and none of them are going to be the same because this is the kind of weight class that this has become at this point.
I think we could do this weight class every other month, and we'd
have a different
and the way
top
it's
five
gone
every
this
time,
year. We could have done it at the beginning of the year. We could have done it in the spring. We could have done it now, and you'd have a totally different top five with the exception of maybe Teofimo, right?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. But you nailed it right on the head, Paul, when you talk about the questions of consistency with a lot of these fighters. Our next one, Devin Haney. I don't know of a fighter, A, to have more questions about his career moving forward, and B, a fighter take a bigger fall in a fight in which he did not get knocked out. I've seen guys get crushed and worry about their health moving on. He lost a fight. Remember, a fight that on the scorecards, very, very close, and yet it seems as though he fell off Mount Everest, Chris. Is this the biggest fall you've seen in these weird circumstances?
And not only did he fall in terms of his ranking and his perception, he fell to the
no
fans.
Contest,
he fell to the fans. I mean, this is socially, this guy is getting raked over the coals. I mean, he's getting totally cooked out there for everything that's happened since the fight, which is crazy to me, especially because he's the guy who wasn't the offending fighter when it comes to the Peds. He showed a lot of heart in that fight. I was actually really impressed by that. Definitely showed some deficiencies in his technique. The hand down, the bow and arrow jab, which is an issue. The inability to get away from the punch is coming, the left hook of Ryan Garcia. So a lot of the technical deficiencies showed up. That were a big problem. And that comes into question when you start talking about what's going to happen next for him with these big fights at 140. But in terms of, what he's done career-wise, what he's been able to accomplish at a young age, and just stylistically, I've always said he's got a really difficult style to deal with. He's long, he's quick, he's got fantastic endurance. He showed he's got heart to get up the way he did in the Ryan Garcia fight. And he knows how to win moments in fights, and it's tough to get rounds against him, as we've seen in a number of these fights. Prograis couldn't win a minute of that fight. And, Lomachenko obviously was, whether you thought he won or not, champ, it was a very, very competitive fight, and he showed some real mettle in there. So, again, a lot of the older guys that he fought when he was younger, but he started stepping up and taking on real fighters. So it's weird. It's hard to figure out where you would even have Devin Haney in this list because, one, this weight class is so strange and recently, but also what happened to Devin recently is very strange. And there's a lot of question marks about where he's going to go for the rest of his career at this point.
Still technically...
Even if it's going to be at this weight class.
Yeah, it's still technically undefeated, Paulie. Is it one of those cases, and you had your ups and downs in your career, you did as well, Chris, next fight, if he looks great, all of this goes away. Is it a one-fight... Yeah, is it a one-fight kind of thing?
Yeah, it's what have you done for me lately. It's always what have you done for me lately in boxing because, again, the schedule is just not busy enough. So the people are going to be talking about your performance for 6 months until the next time you fight, and that's how boxing has become. I do think that people have been too harsh on Devin Haney. He didn't lose the fight. I believe the performance-enhancing drugs had a big reason for that defeat.
And the weight miss that everybody forgot about, right?
The weight. I mean, the weight, I don't know. He got so big from 135 to 140 that he can't even make 140. Yeah. I don't know, but the other stuff, I do think about, and I say, the only thing that can really hurt this kid is if he's mentally off after this fight because it was a physically debilitating fight, right? Yeah. But if he's not mentally off, it's still the same fighter. Now, remember, I thought Devin Haney was overrated before, but it doesn't mean I didn't think he was world class. I just didn't think he was a pound for pound that level fighter. I've not changed my mind on Devin Haney. I just think he's what he is, which is still a world-class fighter who shouldn't be on the pound-for-pound list because he doesn't quite have that whole entire package of things in his boxing style. He's missing just some subtle things. And I think that showed in the Garcia fight, not in the fact of any of the PD stuff, but just in the fact that he's coming forward squared up against a guy can punch. Because what do you think you were going to do? You thought you were going to mentally break him because that's what you expected. And then when he started to land big power on you, you don't go back to your bladed stance. You just continue to stay squared up. Again, a fighter on a pound-for-pound list is typically a smarter decision maker in there. And that's not to say anything, because at the same time, Ryan Garcia's landing those left hooks on PEDs is actually having the effect, more of an effect, because he's on the PEDs, right? So you got to still you can't totally fault Haney, but the lack of adjustment there was kind of disappointing. Force should be kind of disappointing for someone who thought he was a pound for pound level fighter, because that's an I would say amateurish mistakes, because there's a lot of really world class amateurs, but that was a Bush League mistake, where you're trying to just continue to come forward squared up against a guy like this. And I still think he's world class. I just think that those little subtle things show that he's not a pound for pound level guy. I think he can still be a world champion, and he will be a world champion again. I think he'll compete in there. He's going to get beat again, eventually again, and he'll be in there. He'll be in that mix. He's deserves to be in the conversation, essentially, and no, I don't think he won the Lomachenko fight. You can't frame certain things. The odds were he was a -250 favorite to start round 1, and starting round 12, he was a -500 underdog. Okay, he was a +500 underdog. Okay, you can't set that up. That just comes from the gambling lines. Everybody and their mothers is betting the other guy. So you can't tell me 99% of people didn't think Lomachenko was winning that fight at that point. So those things don't lie. You can't set those up. It's just people, the bets that are coming in. Nobody bets to lose money. But regardless, like I said, he was still there. He was in that fight. Like Champ Chris said, he was still in that fight. It was a highly competitive fight in that way. And he's shown that he's world class in general with his skills. Now, how high can he go world class again? I don't think he can be a pound for pound level guy, but he's a championship level fighter. And I think he's going to be a world champion again. And I think people have come down hard on him now because they thought he was a pound for pound guy. If you rated him where I rated him, I don't think there's a need to criticize this kid, because he is what he is, and he's going to continue to be good.
What I'm curious about, Chris, I wonder if you can speak to this. I've heard boxing experts who really know what they're talking about say that Mike Tyson never developed past the age of 21. That in the Spinks fight, knocks him out in 90 seconds. He never got better than that. That just because someone has a year next to their name doesn't mean they're going to learn anything. They can keep developing. How hard is it, Chris, to get a leopard to change their spots, even if you're 25 years old? Is your style kind of set? As you said it, Paulie said it. This guy can be better if he fixes one or two things. How hard is that to do to a 25-year-old who's been boxing his whole life? Can it be done? Yeah,
absolutely can be done. It depends on what kind of work you're doing in the gym and your coaching staff and who you have around you. You see guys take on new coaches and add new folds. And really, all the best fighters are always working on their craft, whether they're with the same coach or not. Right. And I think that's important for Devin to work on some different parts of his craft, especially as he moves up in weight, because he's not a puncher, and he's not necessarily a physical guy at 140 and maybe at 147 like he was at 35 and 30. He was one of the biggest 35-pounders I've seen in a while. I mean, when he was fighting Lomachenko, the size difference was crazy. So he's going to have to add different layers to his game, and that's not to say that he can't. I still think he does have the ability to develop. It's just how much discipline and desire do you have to put it into the gym and maybe get some other heads around, other eyes on the prize to see how you can improve yourself.
I'm going to push back just a little bit. I'm going to push back just a little bit because I think he's got everything that he's going to have, and I think he's good. Making sure you don't square up when you're pressuring a puncher is not something that he didn't know already. You know what I mean? It's just understanding not to let the pressure dictate your decision making to the point where he knows that already. He knows. I bet you knew not to make that mistake. You ask him before that fight. You make this kind of mistake. It's something he knows. He's been boxing his whole life. But in the moment of pressure, you make wrong decisions at times, and those are the things that I think emotionally he'll improve on from the experience.
But also, I don't
think it was a mistake he'd make in another fight, in another situation.
When you put an entire camp into, I'm gonna break this guy down. He's in the back throwing leaping left hooks, Paulie. I'm watching him in the back warming up, throwing leaping left hooks. You don't hook with a hooker. Ryan's a hooker. Yeah. I don't care
and
what.
His father was saying if he dies earlier in the week. Yeah, you're putting the wrong ideas.
You got this whole camp that you're training this. Then you get rocked bad in round one. And Paul, you get hit and things change. You're not thinking the same way. And then you got a corner.
If you thought it was going to be an easy fight, and then it's a hard fight.
And now you're in a dogfight, and then your corner's telling you keep doing the same thing, champ. You're gonna get him. Keep doing this is what we train for. We break him, take him into deep waters. Wrong game plan. Wrong game. It happens. I've had wrong game plans. It happens. You go out there and you look silly.
But champ, it's also hard. It's also hard to break a guy on PEDs, man.
It's also hard that when someone is hitting as hard and is as fast and as big as Ryan Garcia is to make those adjustments on your own. Listen, great fighters do it. Great fighters do it. Doesn't matter with the corner. But listen, corners matter too. And that was my point about what you're saying, Jimmy. It's like, yeah, if he goes back to the drum board, he gets the right corner around him, they have a different kind of game plan. It's a different story. I think there's ability for him to improve, and like you said, champ, to be champion once again.
Didn't he have Ben Davidson in his corner earlier in his career as well?
He's had everybody. He's had a number of different fighters. Yoel Judah was helping her out a lot throughout their career. They've jumped in with a bunch of different guys over the years, which I actually like getting different looks. Teofimo Lopez has done the same thing.
Yeah,
He's brought
Usyk
guys
does
in
it
and
too.
out. Yeah, I think it's very smart. You have to. You have to, especially because the sport's developing and evolving all the time. So you get to see different styles. And when you're a world champion, you fight people from all over the world with different styles and different looks. So you got to get different coaching as well.
And they all have tape on you.
Yes.
That's no, they got to change it around.
Not hard to find.
Today's YouTube. It ain't the old days. VHS scrambling around for VHSs. Just put on YouTube and everybody's on there.
Yeah, you can find everybody, including our number one, Teofimo Lopez. I think he was our universal number one. Incredibly talented, but just what we were talking about, Devin Haney, similar issues about consistency and decision-making. George Kambosos Jr. knocked him down. That kind of took him off his game plan. Big upset in that fight. A lot of the similar issues we're talking about with Haney have dogged Teofimo Lopez. Is that fair or not? In different ways.
Of all the facelifts we've had in this weight class, this one never changed for me. I've had Teo at number one the whole time. He's a sublime talent. He really is. And you mentioned that George Kambosos fight. Yep. That poor kid must go to sleep thinking about that fight every night. If he doesn't have that loss, he doesn't have that night, that bad night against Kambosos, we're talking about Teofimo Lopez as pound for pound one of the best fighters in the world. Yeah, he's a superstar. I mean, he is a star already, but he's just one of those guys, man. And Paulie, I think you brought up the fact that he fights guys at their toughest and is willing to take on anybody. Even guys that nobody looks good against, guys that nobody would really choose to fight, he just fights them. He's a throwback in that way. He'll fight anyway, but the issue is the consistency, like you said, Jimmy. He's got great nights, and then he's got bad nights.
I mean, Chad, he's an enigma, man.
Yeah.
You know, he's the box of chocolates Forrest Gump is talking about. You really don't know what you're going to get with this guy. And then it doesn't help his case. You know, when somebody beats you, I used to root for guys that beat me because it's like, all right, at least if they do good, it doesn't make my loss against them look so bad.
Yeah.
On top of being hounded by his own inconsistency, the poor bastard also had to go lose to a guy who on that night won more rounds than he won in the next 7 fights combined, Kambosos.
Yeah.
Kambosos hasn't won as many rounds as he did in the Teofimo Lopez fight, in all the fights he's had since the Teofimo Lopez fight. That's crazy. So on top of that, that's why that L is so glaring. It's so glaring that he could be on the pound for pound list. He's so glaring. You could almost excuse at times, okay, the Jermaine Ortiz performance and the inconsistencies and the Sando Martin performance. Man, when you take an L like that against the guy who, for all intents and purposes, you're looking at him, you're like, how'd this guy even get to world-class level? Well, you know, he beat Teofimo Lopez. That's how he got to world-class level. Now he's here for a bunch of fights. And every single one of those afterwards looks like you're wondering how this guy even got here. Well, you got to remind it again. Well, he beat Teofimo Lopez. He's here. It's it hurts. It hurts if you're Teofimo Lopez. It hurts you. It hurts your bottom line for this argument. He is so talented and yet so underwhelming so many times.
Yeah, the idea of his consistency not being there when he's at his best, he's among the best. When he's not, it's just flat performances. Is it one of those things, and this hurts me as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I will say it, one of the problems with teams, they tend to play down to their level of opposition. Like, he beats great teams, and he looks bad against bad teams. Is that it with Teo, that he doesn't get up for certain fights, maybe?
Certainly seems like it. Seems like he goes to the level of opposition. Like, he fights Lomachenko, and, I mean, I was there that night. He looked incredible. And he was very, very smart. He was very disciplined. And listen, I'll tell you this, too. I was there all fight week. I saw the manic up and down, the craziness that was going on between him and his father in fighter meetings and the breakdowns and the things he was saying. People are literally like, this guy's whacked. He might not make it to the fight. And then he goes out there and puts on the most disciplined fight against Lomachenko. Looked dangerous the whole time. It's wild.
But that guy right there, that's like a crack pipe, though. That's the problem. That's the crack pipe performance. The high is so high.
Yeah,
he looks so good that you're waiting to see that again, and you're constantly just left hanging. You know, like the crackhead they say can never get that high again.
You're
They just end
chasing
up
the dragon.
The rest of their life, they can never get that. That performance, that's the crack pipe performance right there.
Not that I know anything about smoking crack. I'm just
so good. He looks so good. Yeah, we're not advocating.
While admitting nothing about drug use here at this table, we're just talking about fighting.
But what I'm saying, he looks so good that you're waiting for that high again to feel that, and you're like, you just can't get there. You can never get there again.
Paulie,
that's how we feel as fans watching Teofimo.
The Josh
Taylor
fight.
We're waiting for, because that night he's unbelievable.
The Josh Taylor fight, I think they asked like 21 boxing experts. 21-0 pick Taylor. 21-0 pick Taylor. And Teo went out there and, I mean, looked incredible. Beat him up. Outclassed him, outschooled him, step ahead the entire night.
Yeah, you just made a good point. You make a lot of good points, but you just made another one. We got to start picking against Teofimo.
Yeah.
When we start picking against Teofimo, there's something in him that just rises to the occasion. You give him too much credit, it's almost like he reads his own press clippings and underwhelms. But you start picking against him, this guy pulls it out of nowhere.
Put that man's back against a wall. That's when he steps up. And that's what I mean about those fight weeks. I mean, it's like it's a whirlwind. It is an absolute crazy, manic. What's he saying? What's he doing? And then on fight night, I guess he feels in danger, and then ice cold. I mean, locked in like a Navy SEAL. It's something to watch.
When we've talked about the facelift 140 has received this year, that means there's flesh on the table from that fit. Don't visualize that too much. It's kind of gross. But great names that aren't on this list. Subriel Matias, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, and Jose Ramirez, 29-1. We have not discussed him. Best of the rest. Who you got?
I had him high on my list, actually. And he's a forgotten about guy. I think people forget how accomplished he is. He was an Olympian. He was in many camps with Manny Pacquiao, world champion himself. Took a tough loss in that the fight with Josh Taylor. When I think that was the culmination of.
That was a good fight.
Yeah, it was a very good fight. I was there actually at that fight, and that was when Taylor was just on a different level, man. And Ramirez fought his butt off. He actually made that fight close, even though he got dropped badly twice. Ramirez.
That was a difference, though. The knockdowns were the difference.
The knockdowns were the difference. It was a very, very close fight. Ramirez, he's got one loss, guys. He's got one loss. He stopped Richard Comey. He was a dangerous puncher. His last fight was Francis Bartholomew. Another problem with Ramirez is consistency. I think he's had one fight a year for the past 5 years.
That's killer.
Yeah, it's killer.
Now, Paulie, when it comes to the best of the rest, who do you think gets back to that elite status sooner? Isaac Pitbull Cruz, you said might not be a 140-pounder period, or Subriel Matias after the disappointing homecoming fight? Who do you think gets back there first?
You know what? Put them up against each other and let's see.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
That's a terrific style matchup. Let's just make it. I'll put my matchmaker hat on. Let's put them up against each other. Why not, man? I think stylistically that fight has Fight of the Year written all over it, or at least Fight of the Year contender written all over it.
That's right, matchmaker and sitting at home eating his mom's spaghetti. We appreciate you joining us, Paulie, from the ProBox studios here at ProBox TV. This has been the ranking show. We all know about it. Canelo Berlanga coming up. Check it out.
He's the pride of Guadalajara, the Mexican maestro, the unified super middleweight champion of the world, Canelo Alvarez. His challenger, undefeated knockout artist and pride of Puerto Rico, Edgar Berlanga. It's prime time.
Canelo versus Berlanga, plus Lara versus Garcia. Saturday, September 14th, live on PBC pay-per-view on Prime Video.
For more ProBox TV, scan the QR code on the screen or go to the App Store and Google Play. ProBox TV, your boxing channel.